If you look closely, you can see this little, right down in here, this thing, that just moved. That part there, it's a trip cam. It's a little trip cam. And the trouble is, at some point in its past, it must have gotten jammed up because it's all bent. And that's why this thing is not operating correctly. Sometimes that cam will clear other parts around it, and sometimes it doesn't swing out of the way like it's supposed to, and it jams, and it actually stops the record player from turning. And if I don't get that, if I don't do something about that cam, this record player will destroy itself while it's playing. The trouble is that that cam is worn. It's riveted to the gear. It's riveted to the big cycle gear, and so it's worn, so it's loose. So there's not going to be anything I'm able to do to make that tight enough so that it doesn't ever get caught on anything. And so I'm going to have to find a way to disable the automatic mechanism on this record player so that it doesn't tear itself up. Otherwise, it'll play just fine. So there's more to come on that. Let me show you a little bit what's happening. So for example, in this particular instance, it is jamming up against that rod. Yeah, I'm not able to turn the gear even right now. There it goes. See, it catches right there on that rod. And there's nothing I can do about it because it's so loose that it's got itself bent up. And I discovered that the first few seconds I was playing this machine. Well, the situation I find myself in now makes me sick. The first time I ran this thing jammed up and stopped. And I didn't really know why. I couldn't, everything was put back in place. I have the manual printed. I looked at it. I did everything right. What I didn't do is remove this slider mechanism, because you don't remove these unless you really need to. They don't need much, and you don't mess with them because it's easy to get them out of adjustment. Well, it turns out what jammed is up underneath there. There is a rod that actually controls the movement of the tone arm. And that rod had gotten caught and bent. And that rod, it sits under here. It's got a weight on the end of it. And that rod is part of the trip mechanism to start the change cycle. Well, there is a little cam that's riveted to the gear. And that little cam caught on something and bent. And then it caught on that rod and bent the rod. And so now I've got to figure out what to do about this. If it were my record player, I would totally disable all the automatic functions. Automatic functions only serve to harm records anyway. I don't use them even when I have them working in a record changer. And this record changer is an awfully pretty one and will make a nice turntable if they just want to operate it in manual. So I'm going to see what I can do to convince them to do that. In order to do that, I will need to remove the cycle gear, this whole slider cycle mechanism most likely, and that cycle gear at the least. So I'm going to take a look at that and see what it's going to take to make that happen. I'll leave the video running, but you probably won't see much of it. I'll probably edit most of it out because it'll involve some heavy-duty cussing. Alright, here goes. So the speed change mechanism is this right here. I don't have to touch that, and that's going to be great. There's nothing needs to be done with that. Everything that has to do with cycle change or the cycle mechanism occurs in this linkage here. Now, if I can rig it so that when I turn it on and off, that works, but it never cycles, that would be the ideal situation. So what I have to do is try and get this mechanism off of here. And I don't know how much of it is attached to things that may need to stay behind and how much of it is free to be removed. The sad thing about these things is they were working on cost reduction, and so if you look at this closely, all over the place there are rivets. And rivets wear over time, and as they wear, they get loose, and then things don't work as well as they once did. And that is the problem. Alright, let's start taking things off of here, as much as I hate it. I'm going to remove these two screws off the end of this mechanism, this slider frame. Two screws off of this end. I hope if you're working on one of these you don't have this issue to deal with. I've never seen this happen on one of these before. But I don't really care for the design of this Webster Chicago. It's kind of a fragile design. Okay, so I got the frame basically loose. I may not be able to do this because it looks like that. It looks like the turntable platter, its bearings sits in this. So I'll see what I can do. I may have to put this frame back on just for that bearing, but I've got to get this platter undone. And see, I can't return this needle because that thing is bent, so I got to work around the tone arm now too. What a pain. Well, that's about time, isn't it? This is the cycle change gear that came from this record changer. And if you look real closely at this little cam here, this is part of the trip. This is part of what trips the cycle to start. This thing, as you see, it has been bent actually a couple of times, and it's been a long time ago, judging from the wear on this particular cam. You can see the witness marks. The reason that had to be done is that this thing is really loose, and the rivet is very loose, and so what that does is that allows this, has a fairly tight tolerance, it allows this to flop around. And as you see from this other witness mark here, it's been several times that this thing has swung over too far and gotten caught on something. You can see that because when I saw it, before I could even remove this gear, this thing was bent out of shape way over here. what was happening is this was going around and this was catching on a rod, and when it would catch on that rod, it damaged this cam. Here is the rod that it caught on. This is the trip arm, I believe it's called. Anyway, this is a little indexing arm that basically is a ratchet. There's the ratchet pawls right there, and it rode inside of a guide. Well, that little arm caught on this and bent it around that guide, and so no matter what I do, this thing could probably never be straightened enough to work. Well, maybe it could be straightened enough to work properly, but as loose as this is, this was going to happen again. So I've removed this cycle gear out of the machine so that I can run this machine just as a manual turntable. And so you'll see here, oops, I need to turn it on. I can run it just fine. See, there it is on 33, and it'll run to any speed. There's 45, and if I want to step it up to 78, there we go. And this tone arm moves freely, but it will never return automatically, because that automatic function is just worn out and was going to do damage to the rest of the record player. So I say let's operate this as a manual only record player and enjoy it for the good sound that it will produce, rather than let it destroy itself trying to run it in automatic. Alright guys, here's that record player. I've got it hooked up. Now you hear a little hum because I don't have the ground connected. Let's give it a listen.
None the wiser now, returning with your head out of love. Tired of trying to make it happen, trying to break out on your own. Seems you're always on the fence, you're neither one side or the other now. Well, you better make some choices.
The camera's not picking it up very well, but this radio, the speaker in this radio, just puts out beautiful bass, really nice sharp treble highs, and awesome mid-range. This really is a nice speaker that has a great sound. I'm glad I was able to save this thing. Really makes it sound good.
Battles lost and won, and you're feeling like you've only only just begun to stand up on your own. And do you feel? Do you feel?
Stay tuned for part 20, coming up soon. And then we'll be wrapping this project up finally. So, from your Western Outpost in Salt Lake City, this is Michael, and that's all for now.